Hey guys, it's Harvtronics, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to tune a quadcopter fully on just a single battery. This is a 5-inch quad running Betaflight 4, and the first thing that we're going to do here is just a basic flight test with just some moderate flying to make sure that our motors aren't too hot. And what I'm actually doing here is I've already done that test and I've reduced my filtering a little bit. And I'm just giving it another test to make sure that the motors aren't hot as a result of that. A couple of things to note. First of all, if your quad is already flying the way you like it, then don't bother with this video at all. You might just make things worse. However, if you really want to test the limits of your hardware, or just tinker like I do, then go ahead and keep watching. Another thing that you need to do here before you start is you need to turn your D-min values to 0, which is going to disable that functionality. Once we're done tuning, we can bring that back in, but to start, we're going to leave that completely off so that we can work with the D term directly. So here I've just got a feel for the flying a little bit. This is just the stock PIDs to start with reduced filtering. So I'm going to bring it in for a landing, and I'm going to check the motors to make sure that they're not hot. Okay, so over we go, and they were not hot at all, so I know I'm good to go to continue. So now the next thing we're going to do is a bit ridiculous, but if you want to find out the limit of the tune, then you kind of have to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the OSD here. I'm going to take almost all of the PID values away completely. So P is going to go down to 20 for all of them, I is going to go to 0 for all of them, and D is going to go to 0 for all of them. Now, I'm not going to really go into what P, I, and D, proportional, integral, and derivative do in this video, but I might make a separate video and link to it with my kind of explanation of how they work, because I tend to explain it a little bit differently. It makes more sense to me than what you might typically hear, and I think sometimes the interactions between them get a little oversimplified. So my way of tuning might not be the same as your way of tuning, but this is the way I do it on just a single pack, and it works pretty well for me. I'm just finishing up putting the rest of the D values to 0, and now I'm going to back out and give it a fly. Now you'll immediately see this is kind of absurd. There's almost no control, and I realized that like immediately, and I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be tough. And then I thought I was going to crash into my car, so I just disarmed, and yeah. So let's start bringing in some of those values. Now the lack of just overall stability means that there's not enough I term. So I'm going to bring I up to 30 for the roll axis and 30 for the pitch axis. And we'll just start there. We're going to kind of work with just one term at a time here. I'm also going to bring up the P term for yaw, because I had zeroed that out instead of actually bringing it up to 20, which is where I wanted it. And the I term is going up to 30 as well for yaw. And with those settings, we're going to give it another flight test. So you can immediately see it's got more stability. It's not perfect. What I'll try to do here is show you just staying level, moving forward just a small amount, and you can see really the lack of stability on both the pitch and roll axes. See how it's just kind of bobbling around trying to stay still, but it really can't? That means there's not enough stability, which usually correlates with your I term. So back in for another landing we go. And we're going to bring those I terms up even more. So here you can see I'm setting roll I to 50, pitch I to 50, and yaw I to 50. I tend to keep these all the same until we start getting close to the limit of the tune. So this is a hybrid X. So it's not a true X. The motors are pushed back away from the front of the quad and back and forward away from the back of the quad a little bit more. So we're going to have more authority on the roll axis, but we'll get to that later. So here with 50, you can see that the stability is definitely more. I'm actually able to shoot a fairly large gap there with some confidence. But there's still quite a bit of instability. But now it's starting to look like back and forth instability, where it self-corrects and then goes back and forth, which is more the P term coming out. And because that's such huge and soft oscillations, we're going to increase roll P and pitch P up to double what they were, up to 40. And I think I'm going to bring yaw P up here as well. Yep, so everybody's at 40 now. And let's give it another fly test. So now it's starting to look close to what we had at the beginning of the video. There I just did a little punch to check and see how the nose hold was. It does dip a little bit when I let off the throttle, which could indicate a little bit of lack of I term, or just the fact that we don't have much P or any D yet. So you can see when I do sharp movements, I have these big back and forth rubber banding type oscillations. Again, it's low P term, but if it gets too high, these are going to sharpen up and they're not going to calm down on their own. Yaw is definitely a little bouncy too, and a bit unresponsive overall. Later I'm going to correct that by upping the feed forward value, just because yaw doesn't have much authority on that axis. Oh, and I landed half off the sidewalk. Alright, so we'll keep finding the limit. Roll P, going to bring it up to 50. And pitch P, I'm going to bring up to 50. I'm going to leave yaw alone for a moment. So you can see it's taking longer for the oscillations to calm down, but they're also getting smaller. So this is kind of our indicator that we're getting to the limit of what the P term can do without any help from D. Not as bad, it's a little softer on the pitch axis. So this is where we're going to start to differentiate between the two axes, because we're getting closer to the limits. And you could definitely hear when I was just descending there, trying to stay still, there was some back and forth oscillation, which kind of indicates either too high of P or the fact that there's no D. So just going to make a couple of tweaks here. Pitch was still relatively soft, so I'm going to bring that up a little, and I actually brought roll P down. And now I'm just bringing yaw P up a little bit as well. Another test. We still have those back and forth oscillations when we're just kind of, giving it a little bit of throttle and then coming down. So now the amount of oscillation on each axis is about the same. But obviously it still bobbles all around when we descend into our own prop wash. So to address that, I'm going to bring the P terms down a little bit from where they were. So from 53 back to 50, and roll P I'm going to bring down to 45 from 47. So just to calm that down a little bit, and now is where I start adding in the D term, okay? Just 10 points on roll and 10 points on pitch is all I'm going to add. Let's take a look at the impact that this makes. You're going to see immediately that stability goes up. It's not perfect, but I can actually kind of maneuver around and descend into my own prop wash a little bit and not have too many problems. You can see that when I do these real sharp movements, the number of oscillations has decreased. There's still some there, but the number of them has gone down. Yaw is okay, but still fairly unresponsive. Again, we'll address that with feed forward. All right, so time to bring in a little more of the D term. We're going to go to 15. And then a little bit more on the pitch axis, we're going to go up to 20. We have a little bit less authority there, so we need a little bit more numbing to calm it down. And that's really what the D term is going to do. It's going to numb these sharp movements out. So this is where I'm testing the yaw responsiveness and realizing I really need to add some feet forward in there. But here you can see with these real sharp movements, only on the strongest of movements am I seeing some oscillation back and forth. But here the roll axis is basically perfect. Pitch has a little bit of bobble. And prop wash handling is decent. That was a pretty severe one where I basically went straight down into it. But it's still pretty good. Alright, back into the PID tuning. Trying to decide what I want to do here, and also feeling the motors to make sure that they're not hot with the added D term. And the motors were not hot at all, which is definitely a good sign. Okay, so here I'm increasing the pitch D to help with that a little bit. And we'll fly with that. So this has basically worked out the rest of those tiny oscillations on the pitch axis, just by adding a couple more points of derivative on that axis. Now doing a little bit more aggressive flying, trying to really bring out the prop wash handling, and you can see it's pretty good. When I do an abrupt 180, there's a little bit of it, and you're always going to have it when you descend into it a bit, but honestly, it's cleaned up quite a bit with that amount of D. So the next thing I'm going to do here, after I finish a little bit more flying, is to go in and actually look at my HD footage to see if I can see some oscillations on any axis that I couldn't see through the FPV feed. And what I noticed was that the yaw axis was a little bit too strong. I had a little bit of yaw oscillations, so I just brought that down 2 points, and here's where I bring in the feed forward, bringing it up to just 25 there to introduce a little more error manually into that axis to make it respond more. Now the other thing I'm going to do here, so since we're pretty much done, is I'm going to bring the D-min values for pitch and roll up from 0 to re-enable those. And I like to be between 50 and 75% of what I set for the D terms. Somewhere, around 2/3 is a good place to be, because it does take time to build up that value. And basically what this is saying is, how much am I going to allow it to reduce down from the D value that I set when the quad is basically just standing still. Make sure you save and reboot. If you don't save and you unplug your battery, you're going to lose all these changes, so make sure that doesn't happen. Here's the final list of the PIDs for this particular quad, and that's it. As promised, on one battery we went from completely untuned to completely tuned. So as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.